Hello viewers and welcome to another session of Autodesk Civil 3D 2022. In this section of assemblies and sub-assemblies, we started by providing some study material, then we created assemblies and sub-assemblies. After learning about the linear section editor, we learned how to change the assemblies and sub-assemblies in the linear work. So, in this last session of this section, we will learn about creating sub-assemblies from the polylines. So, we can access the supporting file attached with this video tutorial, and from here, first we will create a profile from surface quickly. You already know how to create it, so I will jump to the final by creating a profile view quickly. We can name it as the terrace view. We can keep the station range and profile view height as automatic and go all by default. Here is the surface profile so that we can proceed with the assembly. First we will create assembly. We have to give an appropriate name, so we will name it as terrace section. All the details are by default. However, we can add the modifier suffix of _static and press OK. Now we can place the assembly at some distance. Instead of going to the tools palette, we will create a sub-assemblies using polyline. So we'll select a polyline, move towards the right side to the 3 units. Then we will move at the rate of 2 units at angle 45 degrees. Then to the right side as 3 units again, and then at the rate of 2 units at 30 degrees. Again on the right side of 1 unit. Then we can press enter to complete the polyline. Now we can select the polyline, go to create subassembly from polyline, select it and press enter. It will ask for a name. We can go for the by default name, and under layers we can add the modifier suffix of _static and press OK. As soon we press OK, a subassembly has been created. Now if we go to corridor, and here it will ask for the name of the corridor. Currently we can give it any specific name like corridor 1, and under the layers we can add the modifier suffix of _static and then press OK. Now the assembly is terrace section, target surface is natural terrain, and we can press OK. Now apply, rebuild the corridor and press OK. You can see no change now, because if you go to corridor and corridor 1, access the properties, and here you will see nothing. There is one big reason, and mostly beginners do this mistake. Once you create a polyline, you must add it to the subassembly. We can rename it as terrace 1. And now here's the option of add to assembly. Now we can select the assembly point like this. Now we can rebuild the corridor and see the effects. Currently there are no warnings, everything is good in place, so we can access towards the corridor, select it, and we can have a visual by object viewer. Make sure whenever you create a subassembly using the polylines, you have to add it to the assembly later on as well. Otherwise, it will not reflect in the corridor. Now let's delete it and create another one. Using the polyline, we will create something randomly. This is just for the learning purpose, so I'm not following the parameters. Now we will create using polylines. Here is the option to create the sub-assemblies from polylines. We can select, press enter key, and then it will ask for a name. Let's name it as terrace2. In layers, we can add the modifier suffix as underscore static and then press OK. Everything else is by default. Like I mentioned before, we have to add it to the assembly. We can modify the origin, move it to this point where it belongs, and you must add it to the assembly. As I have mentioned before, it will not reflect otherwise. So let's select this assembly. Now we have the assembly and sub-assembly connected. All we need to do is go to the corridor and rebuild. Simply apply, it will ask to rebuild the corridor. No warnings have appeared. So far so good. Let's select the corridor, go to object view to have a visual. Now you can see what we have drawn using a polyline is now available, and it has been replicated throughout the corridor. So it is not necessary to go with by default templates of assemblies and sub-assemblies. You can create your own using the polylines. Once you are done, you can save the file as lecture number 82 because we were doing all these changes in the supporting file which was attached along with this video tutorial. Now press OK to save and close the session. And this is how we can create the sub-assemblies from the polyline. Let's call it a day. This is the end of section assemblies and sub-assemblies. See you in the next session. Till then, take care.